Good afternoon from Turkey, and welcome to those of you joining us from around the globe for our higher education talk today. My name is Ayşen Güven, and I work as the Director of Education for the British Council in Turkey. And I'm delighted to be moderating this panel with such a distinguished list of speakers and the audience. I have been informed that we have over 350 registrations from over 30 countries today, which is, I think, an indication of the importance of the theme that we will be discussing. And before I start, I'd like to give you a bit information about our series. This higher education dialogue series was formed in response to the common challenges universities have been facing globally in times of the pandemic. And we're delighted to create this platform for higher education experts and leaders to connect with the UK and universities across the world. And I think it has never been more important to connect and share institutional and national perspectives than ever, given the challenges the higher education sector has been going through. The theme of our session today is one that has been a major area of focus in the higher education sector amongst higher education students and the society in large. We know that universities have been preparing over the last 2 or 2.5 months for the new academic year, and they're at the center of attention for both the academic community and the public. In the face of COVID-19, they have been adapting their teaching and learning approaches, and there has been more micro-planning than ever, perhaps, given the diversity of the context at a national and institutional level. Questions about how they will open the academic year, what challenges they have been, what changes they have been adopting to respond to the challenges, and how they will ensure the well-being of staff and students, not just about staff and students, in fact, but also the larger community, and how they will ensure quality of delivery are amongst many other questions we hear about. So today, we have a panel of distinguished speakers from the UK and Turkey to explore some of these issues and to learn from each other. I'd like to introduce our distinguished panelists today. So we have Professor Tracy Lightfoot. Professor Lightfoot has held a number of senior leadership roles within the university and will become the new Pro-Vice Chancellor for Teaching, Learning and Student at the University of York from October 2020. Welcome, Tracy. We have Professor Tuncay Döğeroğlu, and Professor Döğeroğlu is the rector of Eskişehir Technical University. She is also a member of the Turkish Higher Education Quality Council and Turkey's Presidential Education Policies Council. Welcome, Hocam. And we have with us Professor İhsan Sabuncuoğlu, rector of Abdullah Gül University. And Professor Sabuncuoğlu serves as the founding rector of Abdullah Gül University, and his main area of interest is around institutional changes and the reorganization of global higher education systems called Third Generation University. Welcome, Professor Sabuncuoğlu. So just to let you know that this session will be recorded and shared after we finish our webinar. And once you register, you will also be able to see notices for the future events that we will organize every 2 months. In terms of the flow and format, we are going to hear from each of our panelists for about 3 to 5 minutes about their institutional perspectives and how they're planning to address these. We would also like to integrate our questions from our audience into the second half of the webinar. And for this, I'd like to ask you to please type in your questions so that we can pose them to our panelists in the second half. We also would like to increase our engagement with the audience through some polls that we will be sharing with you. And for our first poll, I'd like to hand over to my colleague Deniz to share the questions. Deniz, if you don't mind sharing the questions, please.
I just shared from Q&A session.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You should be receiving it. So what the question, as Deniz is linking us to the poll, it will be about what you consider the biggest challenge and concern in your institution since the start of COVID-19. And it is basically to find out about your role in higher education. So over to our first speaker now, and to you, Tracy.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this event. It's really good to be here today and to be able to speak to you from all across the world. So without a doubt, moving to an online university in a matter of weeks was never something we thought we would be faced with. And that's despite already having a number of online programmes, and we have over 10% of our students studying online from all over the world. I think whilst colleagues adapted fantastically to ensuring we had a final term of teaching and learning available, it's undoubtedly been preparing for the next academic year, which is causing more anxiety, and that's in relation to two main areas. Firstly, ensuring we have a quality offer for both new and existing students in an environment that is rapidly evolving and changing on a daily basis. Questions such as, should everything be online? How much face-to-face delivery should we be doing? And what can our campus infrastructure support both physically and virtually? And in particular, understanding what good looks like is a key message we're hearing from our academic community, and the perception that it's perhaps all about technology. The second point relates to health and well-being of our staff and students, and the implications of students returning to campus on the city and the surrounding area. We're about to see 30,000 students returning to a city from all over the world that has a standard population of only 200,000. We're continually carrying out risk assessments, understanding how many people can be on campus at any one time, and you can see that I'm already still at my home today, and we're scenario planning in case of local lockdowns that have been occurring more frequently within the UK. And perhaps understandably, face masks are causing some controversy both within our staff and student populations. So moving back to my first point, and what have we done? Well, we've done lots of activities so far, but there's a couple I want to focus on from a teaching and learning perspective. We've established a set of principles and a framework that all programmes will need to align to. These align to balancing that face-to-face and online teaching, plans for assessments, and ensuring the value of our degrees are preserved, and that the health and well-being of our staff and students and equality and diversity considerations will be prioritised. We've also established an online learning expert panel that draws together staff, students, and professional services teams to take an institutional approach to learning and to online and campus-based teaching and learning for 21. We selected these panel members because of their expertise, not only in online, but because of their innovative approaches to teaching and learning and assessment. Their work in creating and enhancement the student community and building cohesive networks. This panel is highly visible across the university, and they're a critical friend to departments to ensure that they receive the guidance and support that they need for the next academic year. They're also acting as mentors and buddies to individual staff. And going back to my point earlier about defining what does good online look like. Small bite-sized chunks of learning, different activities to demonstrate progress, ways of effectively engaging students and having accessible resources. And importantly, showing how technology is an enabler for good online pedagogy as opposed to being the driver. And they've put together a fantastic series of resources to enable staff to feel confident in their ability to move to this way of teaching. And my final message is we shouldn't lose sight of what we've achieved in such a short period of time. And we really need to capitalise on some of the innovation in teaching and learning that has emerged in this crisis. Will teaching ever be the same again? It's hard to tell. But I think we've all learnt new ways of doing things, sharing good practice and working collectively with a common goal to support our students and enable them to succeed whilst balancing this with staff health and wellbeing. COVID has made the world feel a much smaller place, and we need to make sure we keep talking collectively in the future.
Thank you, Tracy. And I think there were some very interesting messages I have taken, and maybe we can discuss them later, like especially what good looks like and ways of effectively engaging students, and I'm sure we will come back to these. I'd like to now ask my colleague to share the results of the first poll.
Yes, the first poll, we asked what was the challenges that is faced, and the highest score from 67 attendees seems to be the quality of online teaching, and following that it is well-being of staff and students, then health and safety measures, and lastly we have accessibility and digital poverty. The attendees are from academic background, students, researchers, and head of departments, and one rector we have.
Especially seeing quality of online teaching as number one doesn't come as a surprise, I think, to most of us. Similarly, health and safety measures and well-being, which is part of our webinar today. Any comments from our panelists on the poll results?
I think it's expected.
Professor, yes, Sabuncuoğlu.
Yeah, I think it's expected. You know, it's pretty much, you know, what we have, but we also get feedback from the students and the faculty members.
Yes, yes, thank you. Professor Döroğlu hocam.
Actually, the results as expected that I think, but I was surprised a little bit. We have two main issues. One of them is health and safety measures and well-being. And the second one is quality of online teaching. According to my idea, we have to balance for two main issues. Health and safety measures sometimes, but participants give these different responses, and quality of online teaching and learning, quality of teaching and learning seems that much more important for them. This is good. They don't feel more health and safety measures at this moment. But as I expected that all the results. Thank you.
Thank you, hocam. Thank you. And I'd like to move on now to Professor Sabuncuoğlu to share with us the preparations at Abdullah Gül University. Over to you, Professor Sabuncuoğlu.
Thank you, Ayşen. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this important meeting webinar. I have a PowerPoint presentation to support my speech. I'm just sharing it on the screen. Where is it? Okay, yeah. Yeah. You see it? Yeah. I think that I think that the challenge that we face today in response to your previous question, without too much lowering the quality of education, pretty much sacrificing the quality, how we can manage to run the online systems. I think that this is a challenge, you know. With respect to the well-being, health and safety, I think most of the people remember the Maslow hierarchy of needs. You know, this is around for more than 50 years. This hierarchy of the needs, according to this hierarchy of the needs, when the coronavirus and COVID hits the world, I think that what we did is we tried to satisfy the lowest two layers, safety needs and physiological and, you know, basic needs. What we did is, as of March 2020, first of all, we put the physical and social distances. We make the mandatory use of mask, enhancing campus hygiene and cleaning protocols. We distribute the mask and disinfectants. It was a serious problem for a short period of the time. And shutting down all ventilations. This is important. Still, we don't use the ventilation in my university. And banning all physical gathering, classes, meeting, exams, and plus, you know, using online tools for all collective activities, and closing fitness center, cafeteria. But we still, you know, kept our library and the laboratories open. We had a limited access to the researchers. For the next semester, for the upcoming semester, on the top of what we have done, we are going to use the HAS code to track the COVID-19 and also use the online registration system. On the top of that, we are planning to relax accessing to some key facilities such as classroom, labs, libraries, cafeteria, etc. This is what we have done, and this is what we are going to do in the very near future as of October. Now, as far as the other you know, top layers of hierarchy of the needs, I think that for self-actualization, esteem, and love and belonging, we have done some services for our staff and the students. Like, for example, we constantly communicate and follow up. We survey, we conduct number of surveys to access the ICT abilities, needs, ideas, curriculum adaptation, you know, many things. And we have also established a teamwork to develop the curricula, new methods of the teaching and the support. We enhance the staff ICT and pedagogical abilities by the help of the teaching and learning center. We also, you know, implement the flexible working hours. We use the remote, you know, facilities as much as possible, and also online transfer of administrative and academic services that we have done for our staff, for our faculty and administrative people. For students, we constantly communicate and keep the student engaged. This is very critical and important. I think that this keyword, engagement, was the main issue during this COVID. We conducted a number of surveys about the accessing ICT capability, about the students' ICT capabilities and their needs, if they need any help. Accommodation of some students stuck in town. We accommodate all of the international students on campus for many months. We also provide IT and some hardware for the students who really need, and also enhance their academic flexibility, grading, examination, redesign our curricula, redesign course methods and the material. We also create new online services using the all the seminars, discussions, and training will be, this type of activities will be work carried out by online services. We also managed, I'm glad that we managed on-campus graduation ceremony that improved the morale that improve the motivation of the students as well as our new graduates. Now, as far as our model to handle the next semester, we are preparing a blended model or hybrid model that has two components, online components and on-campus components. Online components component has two parts. One is synchronous online classes and asynchronous online recorded material. And as far as the on-campus classes and activities, we are planning to run about the 25% of our education on campus and face-to-face or in-class teaching. That is what we are planning. However, there is a small difference between the on-campus classes at AGÜ. We will be using mostly the flip learning type of activities. The class, meetings will be mostly the, discussion, critics, and things like that. Active participation of the students by the help of the active participation of the students. Now, as far as the on-campus education, why we are opening our campus for the next semester, because we think that on-campus, environment is critical and essential for experiential learning, peer learning, and also it helps the students develop their skills and helps the students maintain their physical and mentally, engagement. And also, these facilities is very important for their individual personal development. Now, as far as the complementary changes to be implemented is the upcoming year, we have with respect to our original schedule, we have a very little change in the calendar. Most practical components such as laboratories, studios will be carried out in class on campus. We will be reinforced monitoring for exams. We will also, change if necessary by considering the reassessment of the situation to be able to comply with the international and national regulations. As far as the current pandemic, is concerned, I think this new era removed a mental barrier regarding to digitalization and online education, and forced to quick progress and adaptation in response to the change. Also accelerated the much needed mutation of the higher education. That is, we always talk about the, problems and the burden of the COVID, but this COVID-19, also, provides an opportunity for us to make some radical changes in our education systems in the higher education domain, And as my final note, all these changes due to COVID-19 we experienced are no temporary patchwork for us. But I think that all these are the significant steps towards our university's development in this new era. That is my initial thoughts about this webinar, and I'll be glad to answer any question from the audience. Thank you, Aisha.
Thank you, Professor Sabunjol. And I think again, some very interesting messages there. You shared the measures you have taken, but the emphasis again was on engagement, student engagement and student motivation, especially on peer learning and why there is a need to open some classes for face-to-face. But I think the final remark, I would like to ask Tracy and Tuncay Hocam if they would like to say anything about that the changes are not, you said, are not a temporary patchwork, but actually they are a transition towards a new area. Any comments on that? Yes, Tracy, over to you.
So I think two things for us. I think one, we've supported staff using digital technology a lot more to do teaching, and I think that's important going forward as we move back into sort of face-to-face teaching as well, and I think that's one area we shouldn't lose sight of. Another big change for us at York has been how we use textbooks and resources to support student learning, and because people have not been able to access the library and our students have been distributed all over the world, we've actually looked at different ways to make resources available for the future and different textbooks and different open education resources. And I think this is something that we'll keep doing because it's important from an affordability of education point of view as well, that we can now have books that are freely available to students. So I think there's some really great measures we've put in place. And I think the last one is we've been using our alumni, so our graduates have really engaged with wanting to support our new students and our students that were returning, and again we've got some great relationships building there and conversations, and it's almost like reverse mentoring as well, so there's been some really positive achievements.
Thank you Tracy. And if I can, okay, thank you Tuncay Hocam. If I can at this stage maybe pause a little bit before I move on to our third panelist and pose two questions to our initial two speakers. Questions that actually came from our participants, from the people who have registered. So my first question is over to you, Professor Sabuncuoğlu. You mentioned the need about engagement and motivation. The question that came from the audience was about how can we gain the student's support, who's actually the student who's not in favor of receiving their education without the social environment on the campus?
Now we are living in difficult times, you know. I think that what we are missing with the online education today is the social environment. I mean, the students are not able to get access to the social environment, and this is critical for their development, their education as well as personal development. To be able to do this, we must be able to develop some online tools for social activities, interactive activities. We should also make them online sessions or the lectures or whatever the online education as interactive as possible. We should also, I must also point out the fact that, you know, online education comes with some certain, you know, inherent or natural advantages. We are not able to make use of these advantages, such as, I think that with the online education, we can develop some new skills, some development of new skills are on the picture, you know, autonomy, self-discipline, ICT, the things like that. We will be able to develop during this process, and flexibility and comfort, self-paced learning, you know, this is very critical. And I think that we must be, I mean, we can use this advantage as well. And also with the online systems, we will be able to get greater access to networking opportunities. You know, we will have much larger network with the online system. You know, that's what it is. That's what we have to make use of the you know, online system advantages as much as possible in nowadays.
Thank you, Hocam. Tracy, if I can pose one question to you, one that came again from our audience. It is about the teaching community and how the teaching community can embrace the challenges of digital education. This was one question that came from our participants.
Thanks, and I think undoubtedly, I think some of the teaching community do perceive digital education as a challenge, and for many it's a very different way of delivering their teaching. But I think I'd like to turn this round the other way, and what opportunities does digital education provide going forward? And I think there's lots of positives of moving out of this. I think it allows for more inclusive education, and I think it allows for individual voices to be heard. So I think one thing for the teaching community to think about is When you've got 200 students in front of you and you ask a question, it's always the confident, it's always the loudest that puts their hand up and asks those questions. Using digital tools to do this, it allows those students the opportunities whose voice isn't always heard to have that voice coming forward. And I think that's one of the really important features, how we can use technology and digital education to be more inclusive. And I think the other aspect of it is how using digital education can mean students from all across the world can access and be able to participate in education. I think for us in York, when COVID came and the lockdown happened, was when our students were distributed everywhere. It was at the end of the term. We managed to deliver an assessment, set of assessments and teaching for that term. So I think it's important that we can look at how digital can allow us to access all corners of the world. And I think it's about inspiring our staff and also making them feel confident in their ability. So it's about that training and skills based. But I think it's an opportunity for us to take forward rather than be seen as a challenge.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you. I think that is definitely focusing on the opportunities and, you know, the learning points that come from this crisis, I think is definitely something we should be focusing on. Now, I'd like to move on to our third panelist, we have already seen from the poll that quality assurance comes as a major issue. So I'd like to hand it over to Professor Tuncay Döğeroğlu to share with us both her institutional and national perspective.
Okay. Thank you, Ayşen. Dear panelists, British Council team, and distinguished participants from over 30 countries, and more or less probably 260 people. Again, good afternoon to all. Many thanks again for your invitation for this valuable organization on this hot topic. Nowadays, there are a couple of critical questions in the agenda for all of us. First one is, how are we preparing for the new academic year? And the second question is, how are we managing quality learning and teaching process in the pandemic period? As you know, that are lots of structural changes in the agenda of higher education in all over the world due to pandemic period. Despite all these challenges, the world has started to get used to this new normal system. The solid infrastructure of higher education in our country, no compensation in the minimum criteria, variation process, central coordination with flexible administration system, and disciplined operation of our universities play an important role in overcoming this challenge with this difficult period. At this point, it's observed that Turkey's higher education system is clearer compared to many other countries, and it has realized practices targeting minimum agreement. Both the central structure and the flexible administration have played an important role in this. It's seen that universities in many countries that are advanced at higher education but lack central structure have taken different decisions from one another in a disorder. The Council of Higher Education has recently published the new normalization guide in the global outbreak by examining world examples. All of us, we know that. The guidebook, this guidebook includes framework, decisions and recommendations under the headings of distance education practices, applied trainings, measurement and evaluation practices, foreign students, meetings, congress, and exchange programs. As explained in this guide, since the epidemic is a dynamic process, different practices are allowed by the universities according to the regional and local course of the epidemic. With the transition to distance education in all programs of national higher education institutions due to COVID-19 pandemic, ensuring quality assurance in distance learning has become the top priority on Turkish Higher Education Quality Council's agenda. Throughout this process, Quality Council aims to guide higher education institutions on the components, principles, and quality indicators of the quality assurance system in distance learning. I would like to say a couple of things about the preparation studies for the new academic year, especially in my university and the other universities in our city. Actually, in order to ensure the nationality, rationality, and applicability of the decisions taken during the planning stage for the new academic year. A decision-making model based on internal and inter-institutional communication and consultation has been established. In this context, with the participation of the rector and other senior executives, a series of meetings were held with all unit and program administrators, faculty staff, and all associate degree, undergraduate, and graduate students. And the opinions and suggestions of all stakeholders were carefully considered and also evaluated. After the discussions within the institutions reached a certain maturity, the senior executives of local state universities in Eskişehir came together to discuss possible scenarios, identify common problems, and to cooperate to find the most suitable and applicable remedies without sacrificing from the quality of the learning outcomes. On this occasion, I thank our university's academics, administrative people, and students for their support and understanding in a rocky road and difficult period. This is a summarizing of our situation, Ayşen, just the introductory part.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Döroğlu, for sharing your both institutional and sharing us some of the national regulations. Thank you. I would like to pose a question first to you and then maybe to our other panelists, because I have been receiving some of the questions a lot about ensuring quality of online learning and especially learning outcomes. So if I can pose this question first to you, Hocam. There's one question specifically about whether qualifications of the new educational system can ensure the same standards of traditional face-to-face education.
Thank you. This is really critical and very important question. Sometimes it's difficult to give answer, but I try to give crystal clear answers. I will do my best. Actually, we have two basic principles that we must keep in mind constantly during this special period, and we have to consider both of them. First one is well-being, health and safety of employees and the students, and the second one is, as you mentioned, that quality of teaching and learning processes.
Mm-hmm.
If we focus on the second one, quality of teaching and learning processes, teaching method may change according to my mind, myself, due to external influences. But there are two basic principles in the education process at the universities that are independent of the teaching method. First one is securing the achievement of student-centered, output-oriented, competency-based learning outcomes. And the second one is ensuring the sustainability of the quality cycle, such as planning, implementation, evaluation, and revision facilities for this cycle. I think that if we apply distance education methods and assessment and evaluation correctly, there will not be much loss in the competencies we aim to provide students with. I'm sure that all the participants remember the biggest challenges and concerns we have faced during the pandemic transition stage, beginning of March till now. All as academic people and students, we are all witness for this period. For example, some challenges and some concerns, I will give some examples. Utilizing technology effectively. The need for a better distance education infrastructure. It means better technology and better environment equipment. Limited information about interactive and reflective distance education, and limited ability of academic staff to implement it effectively. Having to work much longer hours to digitalize course material and modify course content accordingly. And dealing with challenges of working from home, more accessible counseling, not feeling so connected to students, lack of clear policy and expectation on student engagement, and more probably. Now we have some experience how we will manage these challenges or concerns about distance education. They are all really important for planning new academic year. Just I would like to mention some of them. To experience how to manage potential risks brought about by the rapidly changing, uncertain, and complex environment with our corporate capacity and corporate agility. Mm-hmm. Effectiveness of face-to-face learning can be increased by supporting it with distance education techniques. Achievement of the learning outcomes depends very much on the degree of activities and reflectiveness of the course. Securing an objective and fair assessment and evaluation process in distance education is much more difficult relative to face-to-face education. Just some examples related with this topic. I'm sure that we will manage for next academic year much more effectively because we have some experience. We did urgent distance teaching last academic year, but now we are much more stronger than before.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Professor Döroğlu. I think one emphasis there, which I really like, is that the principles of quality assurance don't change, you know, whether it's face-to-face or online. And I think we always think that, you know, the context changes this, but I think the principles you've shared will be a good guideline for for some of our participants, especially the ones who've asked this question. Thank you. I'd like to thank our three panelists, first of all, because we will now move on to a quick poll to our participants, and one about what they would like to get support from. If I can ask my colleagues to share the question of the next poll to our participants.
I just shared from Q&A session. Hope everybody can see. Thank you.
Can we see it? Yes, okay. So the question that will come to the poll is about which area would you like to get more support from in your university? So we'll see the answers later. And my colleagues have been collating the questions that have been coming in during the presentation of our panelists and the discussions we've been having. There are some which I would like to, I mean, there are some questions around quality of research. I mean, we haven't mentioned quality of research in the presentations, but there's one specific question about how universities can be supported to proceed with quality research.
I can start with, or?
Okay, so yes, Professor Sabuncuoğlu, and then I'll hand it over to Tracy.
Ayşen, since the very beginning, during this COVID-19, we try to keep our laboratories and research facilities open. That's what we did by taking into account strictly the rules, sanitary measures, you know, considering the sanitary measures, healthy measures. That's what we did. And, you know, this research issue is really, depends on the area and discipline. If you are in the area of computer science, computer engineering, AI, or, you know, it is much easier compared to other areas like, you know, chemistry, physics, or mechanical engineering, you know, type of disciplines that require some laboratories and physical equipment, you know. Really, that's an issue, but we try to keep that things open, and also we have also given the limited access to temperature.
I can see. Did we lose Professor Sabuncuoğlu? Because of the internet. Okay, no problem. So maybe I can, in the meantime, go over to Tracy. Thank you, Tracy.
I think it's a really interesting question, this, and I think that balance between research and teaching is one that's inherently a challenge within universities sometimes, as colleagues battle to balance that workload. What we've seen in York are a couple of things. Some of our research is on hold, as has already been alluded to, where laboratories have had to close, where there's not been access. And in particular, we have a lot of research in York that involves working with the National Health Service and with patients. And clearly that there's been other priorities in these areas over this time. But we have seen a number of research projects that have come out during COVID as well, which again has been really positive for us. We've been involved with some of the trials. We've been looking at mental health and resilience. We've been looking at older people. So we are starting to see some research now to come to funding levels. So funding bids are going in, and also some of the activities. And also we've had to see with our students, they've had to change direction in their projects as well. And what's really impressed me, both with our master's students and our PhD students, about how innovative they've become with the ideas that they've put forward in terms of not being able to perhaps go to different countries to conduct their research, and how they've looked at doing that remotely as well. And I think that balance between research and teaching, I think is going to continue into the next academic year as we're faced with those changing scenarios all the time and that balance of workload. But I think it's really important that we don't lose sight of research. And in particular in the UK at the moment, we're going through our Research Excellence Framework initiative where we're all working very hard to make sure we've got the outputs, we've got our impact assessed. So I think it's something that we're working collectively on to make sure. And I think for me, the area that we need to make sure is our early career researchers. Those individuals at the start of their careers, we need to make sure they've got the time, the capacity and the tools and facilities to take forward, because they're on the cusp of these very exciting academic journeys, and we really need to support them to do that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tracy. That's very useful. And I think the stress on innovation and how innovative MA students come, I think that is a very valid point. Yes. Professor, yes, Daryl.
Just a couple of words I would like to add. In the difficult period, pandemic period, we were preparing our strategic plan. Of course, we considered all pandemic difficulties for educational and research activities and other main issues. And we did in that period. I did actually many online meetings with the students and researchers and all academic and administrative staff, just to keep their moral and motivation in a certain period. And we did another things. We gave a special call for COVID-19 for the research projects in our university. I think 6 or 7 different projects related with the COVID-19 and special call on this topic. We try to manage at the beginning of pandemic period, as other universities, all the laboratories was closed, and young researchers and senior researchers, of course, they followed from their home. But in that period, some of them carried all the things to do something in their home. Some of them was started to write some papers and academic reports, etc. We are all trying to manage effectively, even if it was very difficult period. Now we have already started on the lab and workshops, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Döroğlu. You mentioned strategy, and I think we have one question that I see about strategy, which says many institutions have prepared their institutional strategy before COVID-19, and right now, under these circumstances, can these be realized? Is one question, and what will be the first priority in terms of strategy for your university? If I can pose that question to both of you. Do you agree with the statements that there is a change, or?
Actually, flexibility and agility probably will be important next years. Now we are living a pandemic COVID-19 period, but successively probably the other urgent periods in near future or far future. We have to use to manage all these difficult periods, and we have to create the strategies to manage institutional level and unit levels and departmental levels. We have to ready for every time, every situation. As I mentioned at the beginning of my speech, external effects or external things will be changed, but it will not be important. The main issues and main purposes has to be the same. We have to keep same. And for teaching and learning activities and research activities and supportive activities for all of them, we were lucky because we were preparation stage for our institutional strategic plan. But I'm sure that other institutions has to be related with this pandemic to manage effectively.
Thank you, Hocam. Tracy, any?
I think the key comment there for me was about the agility and the fact that we have to be agile and responsive to all situations. Interestingly, we're just going through our new vision and our new strategy for the next 10 years, so it's come at quite an interesting time. But I think really the ultimate aims and ambitions of the university are still the same, which is to provide that excellent and high quality student experience, to conduct meaningful research, and to create to have an environment that enables all staff and students to succeed. I think it's just how we're achieving that is very different at the moment. So I completely agree with my colleague that it's not changing that much, but it's about that flexibility. And we might be doing things in different orders, but ultimately the goals are still the same.
Thank you, Tracy, and nice to see you back, Hocam. I think we're coming towards the end of our webinar, and I just got the message from my colleagues. The poll is still continuing, so maybe we can share the results after the webinar when we send you the link. I would just like to invite our panelists for their final remarks, and that I would like to, that can be about the biggest challenge you foresee in this academic semester, or it can be about the biggest opportunity. So whichever you prefer, but maybe just a couple of lines, please, so that we can finish the webinar on time. Who would like to start? It can be the biggest challenge or the biggest opportunity. We have mentioned some, but just to give you the final word.
So I'd like to just make 2 quick points. I think the biggest challenge really is that ever-changing environment and having to meet the needs of all of our stakeholders, which as our students return to study becomes increasingly more challenging. But I think the biggest thing for me is we all need to keep talking. I think never has there been a time, as you've already said, to work together and at a global level to share our experiences and challenges and ideas. And for me, the biggest opportunity is how universities have come together during this time, not just to share research, which has often been the case, but to share their experiences of teaching and learning in quality. And I think for me, we need to keep doing that. And I think it's great that these events occur and allow people from all over the world to get together. So I think that's the opportunity for me, is that, again, just to say, I've said it once, the world's a smaller place. So let's capitalise on that and we can keep talking.
Thank you, Tracy. Yes, so jump in.
To me, biggest opportunity is for on the online. We were talking about the online systems for many decades. I think that it is the time to realize the effect of online education. During the COVID-19, we have learned that, in fact, we have noted that we are not as good as we expected at the online systems. We have to improve it, and quality of the online education is not at that level, at a desirable level. So we have to work hard. I think that we have to train teachers, academic people, more than the students, to effectively utilize the online tools, because the students are more adaptable, more flexible in terms of adapting the online systems and new era. As far as the biggest, as far as the challenges, I think that we need a campuses. I mean, the campuses are very critical for freedom of the students, for their personal development, for their social, cultural, and intellectual development. Campuses are very important. So we must be able to blend the campus education together with the online systems. I think that that's also the very important challenge.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Sabuncuoğlu. A final remark from you.
Very, very final remark. I believe that we will get much more stronger after the pandemic period. We learned a lot. We gained a lot of experiences. But just I would like to impress one thing, to discuss possible scenarios, identify common problems related with this period. To solve our common problems, probably it's very important to get together all strategic stakeholders, internal or external, students, academics, administrative people, other universities, and also local people, and all city governments, probably. If we use this type of management style, we will be much more stronger than before. Again, I wish everyone a healthy, happy, and successful new academic year. Thank you, Ayşen.
Thank you, Professor Doğeroğlu. And I'd like to thank you all again, once again, for your contributions and our participants for their questions. I think there are some key messages coming out. Obviously, when I talked about the reason for these webinar series, this was exactly it, learning from each other, which Tracy, I think you focused on, but also what Professor Doğeroğlu focused on about actually, it's the more we need even more communication now, and it's even beyond the university. And I think, Professor Doğeroğlu, you mentioned about how you came together with the rectors of your city and the governors of the city to actually discuss the impact of the students coming back to the city life and the well-being of the city. I think those are very core messages I have been receiving, and the focus on training academics, supporting them on how to be more agile, maybe what Professor Sabuncuoğlu mentioned, and the fact that we need campuses, that it is a very difficult decision for the policymaker to actually keep it balanced. I mean, we can't, I guess, in the long term, can't keep them further closed. So thank you again, and thank you to our participants, and I hope you have enjoyed our webinar. Just to remind you that you will be receiving a link about the recording, and where we will also share the poll results. And obviously we want to hear from you about what you would like to see in this new webinar series. We would like to hear the themes that would be of interest to you. And just to announce, our next session will be on looking at English in higher education. And I have seen some questions in the chat box about English, EA English for academic purposes, a lot of questions related to English as well. So just to say to our participants that this will be the focus of our next webinar. And I hope to see you again in our next webinar series, and thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.